Hi you guys, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how I paint and manipulate rice paper to create decoration for cakes, and in this instance I'm creating a mermaid's tail. Okay, so this silpat, or this like non-stick baking mat, is what I use. You can use any kind of non-stick baking mat that is see-through. That is key to working with rice paper when you're going to paint and kind of manipulate it. Okay, now I also have here the rice paper. Dun, dun, dun. Not the same as wafer paper, two totally different things. I will have a link for you in case you need one to get rice paper, but two totally different things. And then I have a pan, a shallow pan of warm water. It does not have to be hot, it should just be warm, that I can stick my rice paper into. Okay, now I'm picking out a sheet. This is the rice paper. I've had this rice paper for a very long time now, so mine is a little bit cracky, but that's okay because we are going to rehydrate it in a moment. Now I'm going to slide this into the warm water. You want to keep it in maybe 15 seconds. You want the edges to start to curl just a little bit. I took mine out maybe a little bit too early. Keep it in until the edges start to curl. It's generally around 15 seconds. Okay, then transfer it over on top of your non-stick baking pad, whatever you're using, and smooth out the air bubbles. You'll be able to do that a little bit better if you've left it in for a little bit longer. You'll be able to do it a little bit better than I was able to here. Okay, we want this to be wet, right? If it's too wet, you can kind of use a paper towel and dab at it a little bit, but we definitely want it wet while we're painting on it. I have edible art paints that I'm using. You could use straight gel colors, but I love my edible art paint, so I am using this pink color, and I have slipped underneath my mermaid tail that I'm using for reference. It's just printed on printing paper. I've slipped it underneath and I can see through, right? I am painting on top of the rice paper, but I can use my little template underneath the baking pad as a guide. So that's all that is there for, painting on top of my rice paper. Okay, for this particular project, I'm adding it to a mermaid cake that I have made. And if you want to see how to make the full mermaid cake that you'll see pictures of at the end, you can go over to cakeheads.com. If you remember, you'll have access to the full tutorial of how I made that full cake. But I'm using the straight edible art paint to start with, and kind of tracing around the edges and then the lines that I see in the middle using my guide below. But now I've got high proof alcohol. Mine's called Diesel, but it's just like Everclear, or you could use a very high proof vodka. And using the same brush, I'm going to dip it into the alcohol, and I'm just going to kind of run that over the lines that I just made to thin them out a little bit and have them blend into the area around it a little bit, because I just like that look, blending out those lines a little bit so they're not so harsh, they're a little bit more artsy. So I'm just doing that over top of all of the pink lines, kind of blending them out a little bit, and spreading that color around just a tiny bit. Okay, and then my project needed a little bit of white in it as well. So I've got my white edible art paint. Now, if you wanted to keep this more translucent, you could stop right there. I don't need it to be totally translucent, so I am going to add a little bit of this white, but again, this is just because of the project that I'm going for here. So if you're following along with this mermaid project, you can do it however you want. I added white in between the pink lines, but again, I'm using now the Everclear, or the high proof alcohol, to kind of blend those lines a little bit over top of the white. Just blend them in a little bit so it's not so stark. This did not need to be a super precise sort of look, just a sort of pink blended look, so I'm happy with that. Okay, now you're going to put that in the oven on the lowest temperature for 5 minutes. I put mine in for too long. Here you can see this. I put it in for 10 minutes and it's a little bit too stiff. You do not want to do that. So I had to redo my whole project. So here's my project redone and put in on the lowest temp, which I think mine was 170 degrees Fahrenheit, for 5 minutes only, and it should come out like this. It's kind of like a sticker decal. It's kind of that sort of consistency here. It's not too sticky, but it's definitely super flexible still. That is what we want. We don't want it stiff the first time around. So don't put it in the oven for too long or you're going to ruin your project. Okay, then you can cut out your tail or whatever you're creating. You can use scissors or you can use an X-Acto knife, but using this X-Acto knife actually cut into my Silpat mat here. So if I could go back and do it over, I would not have used the X-Acto knife. I would have just continued on with the scissors. But I did use the knife to make some slits in the ends of the tail there as well. Okay, now you can cut off a little extra piece of the rice paper that you cut off. And I just use a little square, and that's how I'm going to attach my sucker stick here, or popsicle stick, whatever you want to call it. It's more like a sucker stick. And I just kind of flip over my project. Don't get it sticking to itself or you'll mess the whole thing up. And I just using a little bit of water onto that little extra piece that I've cut. Just a little bit of water, not glopping it on. That makes it a little bit sticky and it acts like a piece of tape. So I added that onto the back. You can see the little areas that I kind of slit to make a little wispy there. So if you're following along with this particular project, you can do the same thing or not. It doesn't really make a difference. It doesn't make too much of a difference doing that. And then you can either just let it dry fully on its own and it will probably curl up on you a little bit, which is actually a nice look. Or you can, I'm using wax paper here because I didn't have parchment paper. I recommend parchment paper, but wax paper still worked. And an iron. I created like a little makeshift ironing board on my counter by using just a little towel underneath the Silpat. I put the wax paper over top and just very quickly on a high heat setting, you saw that I just ironed it a little bit. That helps it dry a little bit more, but also kind of flattens it out if it's curling too much on you. So it's still curling, so I'm flipping it over onto the other side with my wax paper in between. I'm just very quickly, we do not want to burn this thing or ruin it in any way. So I just very quickly ran the iron over top just to flatten out a little bit. Now this still has more to dry, so it will still curl up on me a little bit, but actually I'm good with that because it's a mermaid tail and I want it to pop out of my project well. So this is what it looks like when it is fully dry. You can also just add something on top of it for a little bit of weight if you want to keep it fully flat. But the one on the right was my first mermaid tail that I overcooked in the oven. So I just wanted to show you what it looked like. It did not come out well, so do not do that. Okay, Roxy and Rich, edible sparkle dust. I love this stuff, and it is a mermaid tail, and mermaids need to glitter a little bit, so I just pumped a little bit on to my final project. Again, just for those of you who are following along with this particular project, I also used a little emerald green sparkle dust. Pump that on a little bit. It doesn't stick super well, so I just got the slightest bit of color on there, slightest bit of sparkle, but that was perfect for my project and exactly what I wanted. And this was my end mermaid tail that I then was able to insert into my buttercream mermaid watercolor cake project, which you see here. I actually broke the tail because I dropped a can on top of it. But if you can use just a little bit of water to stick it back to itself, and it worked perfectly. And you can see it popping out of my project a little bit. It's slightly translucent. It just was the perfect medium to use for this tail. So I hope that helped you learn to work with rice paper a little bit. And if you want to join our Cakeheads family over on cakeheads.com, come on over and become a member. We'd love to have you. We learn so much together, help each other out, share our work, and learn from all the tutorials. We'd love to have you as part of the Cakeheads family. See you later.